All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of Polarity and Google, all of our Google integrations. Joseph Ravella, our Chief Strategy Officer and Polarity co-founder, is going to go ahead and lead the discussion. And I'll hand it over to you now, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Brenna. Today we're here to talk about the power of Polarity and Google. We probably won't be able to talk about all the different integrations that we've created with their technology, but we did have several that we wanted to highlight and share with the community, as well as cover some things that can be done outside of Polarity. So whenever we do a community presentation, we always like to have tidbits that are very useful for our user population, but also that can just be beneficial to the community at large. So we're going to cover what's Polarity in 15 seconds or less. What is a Polarity integration? Because the crux of this webinar here today is really what our Google integrations do. So we'll cover the different classes of integrations that we bring forward, why they exist, and how they can be used across different types of use cases. We'll cover our integration framework as a whole within the confines and construct of this. We'll also touch on 5 or 6 core of the Google security tool integrations that we have, and then we'll get into some fun with Google's programmable search engine. So we're excited to share that with the community. You'll be able to use that inside or outside of Polarity, and then we'll head right into a recap. And again, just a 30-minute session today, so we won't dilly-dally and we'll get right into it. So what is Polarity? If you're familiar with us, our tagline, knowledge and data is spread across your distributed systems. And what we're after is fusing them together in one unified view. So we anticipate that teams are working in many tools and that not necessarily that single pane of glass scenario has been realized yet. You'll need to go where you need to go to get the job done. And Polarity will bring your information and your knowledge to you in a data to the analyst format, not necessarily the analyst having to go and fetch all the data. So that's what we do in a nutshell, and you'll see aspects of that throughout the remainder of the webinar. So what is a Polarity integration? These integrations or connectors, some people might refer to them as modules, we affectionately refer to them as integrations, are ways that we can interconnect largely through the RESTful APIs of other technology stacks, query that information, bring it back to the end user so that we can enrich their experience with more context, ultimately so they can make better decisions. But one common misconception about our integrations is that it's enrichment only, that we're only bringing data forward for consideration, but really it's more than that. Certainly, we do have the ability to query data from structured data sets. These are your SIM platforms, your SOAR platforms, your log aggregation platforms, place where we've done a really good job at indexing stuff. But we can also query your knowledge bases. So these are things like your finished intelligence reports, your supplier lists, Confluence pages where it documents know-how and how-to within your organization. And we really like to differentiate between those two things because one is finished and the other is available, but both are valuable to end users as they're going about their day-to-day. We also have action and submission integrations. For us, this could mean interacting directly with something like a SOAR, where you can kick off a playbook, or you can submit a ticket, or you could submit something like a block request right into a proxy. We've even gotten to the point within many of our integrations where you can actually contain an asset on the fly directly from the overlay window. Obviously, as a former responder, I wouldn't recommend doing that outside of the proper channels or unless you have a agreed upon in advance SOP to do so to avoid contributing to any further harm to other nodes or assets within the environment where you're responding. And then we also have utilities and functions. This is a class of integration that allows you to manipulate data or transform the data. So things that can take timestamps and transform it back into human readable, or maybe a timestamp 6 time zones away from you and you want to see it in yours today. Or maybe you have something that's JavaScript encoding or in some other type of encoded form, and you want to get that back to human readable. So there's really 4 of these categories that we put our integrations into. And we have Google integrations across 3, if not all of these. We're going to go into several of those right now. The first one that we want to cover is our integration with VirusTotal. We're leading with this because most folks know VirusTotal. A lot of folks trust VirusTotal, and it's a very popular Polarity integration. And what this integration is going to give you is the ability to search virus total on the fly seamlessly from anywhere where you work. So for example, if you have a notable, if you're an incident responder responding and you are investigating, perhaps several events that have been escalated or bubbled up to your attention, you may want to get a quick read on what it is that's being represented within something like a notable event. So here, using Polarity, I'm just going to select the text on the screen using what we refer to as our focus mode. And what you're going to see is we're automatically searching against virus total. Now, right now, only the virus total integration has been turned on, strictly for presentation purposes, but certainly in line with that video that we showed just in the beginning, we can be searching 10, 20, 30 different sources on the fly and bringing it all into this window. But in this case, we really wanted to highlight the value of virus total. In this case, there were 3 distinct entities that were representing or making up this kind of traffic pattern that we were looking at in the notable. You can see the first one, the 45 IP address, has a very conspicuous red flag associated with it. And that virus total flag, the red flag specifically, is going to get thrown anytime there's any more detections than 4 or more, really. If you have 4 or more, we're going to give you that nice, clear representation on the screen that perhaps we should be giving a little bit more attention to this thing. Similarly, we have the orange flag for this 207 IP. The orange flag gets thrown anytime there's between 1 and 3 detections. And then certainly there's going to be many occasions where virus total has no working knowledge of the indicator that you're investigating, or in this case, it's been analyzed and there's just no detections of merit to bring forward to your attention. That is configurable, those thresholds. So if you want to set a lower threshold for what kind of gets that red treatment versus that orange treatment stoplight protocol, you can manipulate that. This is what we call the summary block. You can get into the details, of course, for virus total. It's aligned with the setup on the page itself if you were to transition over to the live virus total page on their website. You have the detection summary here. You can also get additional details in the tab. And then my favorite is the relations, which will actually bring you back files that have been scanned, been analyzed, where perhaps the association has been made to this 45 address. And then you can grab that information and, if you'd like, search it even further. So definitely want to be able to create a similar experience. Obviously, within a confined UI, there's a lot of stuff in virus total. You will definitely need to go there in order to perform various functions. But we do want to cover, the 9 out of 10 scenarios. So give you that quick glimpse insofar as what's available in VT, give you the ability to pivot to it if you like, just by clicking these hyperlinks, and then continue on doing your work, or the next phase of the investigation once we've helped to make you aware of perhaps something a little bit more suspicious going on in the confines of your investigation. That's our virus total integration. Also, of course, searches, hashes, various other attributes, file names, etc., and can surface similar information for those types of selectors as well. The next one we want to touch on is Chronicle. So we've definitely seen over the course of the past few years a lot of popularity and traction from the Chronicle platform. Certainly something that's being used as a technology on its own, but also being used in conjunction with other leaders in the SIM space. So this integration was built based on popular demand by our customer base. And what this allows you to do is identify information that exists within Chronicle, both in the form of indicators of compromise and overall intelligence, but also historical events that have occurred within the environment. So here within the Polarity overlay window, I'm going to turn on Chronicle Backstory. I'm going to hit the back button, and now I'm ready to be searching Chronicle. All of this is pre-configured by your admin. So when you turn on your Chronicle integration, your VT integration, chances are it's going to be ready for you to use right out of the box. And here in this example, we have something like an FBI flash report, where we're becoming aware, perhaps for the first time, of some indicators associated with bad activity. And just as I searched earlier with virus total, using Polarity focus mode, I'm now going to use focus mode to search, and Polarity is going to call out both now to virus total and Chronicle Backstory in parallel. So this is federated search at its purest. We are taking requests from the client, sending it to the server, and our server is sending out real-time requests to the integrated Google datasets like virus total and like chronicle. Here, only one item has been associated with the chronicle data set that we're connected to, and I'm able to drill into those details just as easily as I am to drill into the virus total information. Here, luckily, in this case, if this was a true scenario where I was receiving a flash report, I get the 0 events, that feeling of warmth, knowing that this particular thing has not been observed within my environment. It is, however, associated with IOCs, so I have a little bit more assurance and confidence that perhaps our organization has already informed its defenses with this information that we've received through threat intel feeds or other processes that have resulted in the actual information being fed into Chronicle. So again, concept is being able to surface information now from VT and Chronicle, get that into the hands of the analyst without the analyst having to painstakingly go search and fetch for it, and ensuring that we can use these tools that we have at our disposal, because they are very valuable and we want to make sure that we're using them on every occasion so that we can, obviously defend our organizations, institutions, government bodies a lot more efficiently, yes, but for anyone who's heard me speak before, we want to do this effectively, because there's really no good reason to do a poor job quickly, right? We want to do these jobs fast, but we want to do them as thorough as humanly possible. The next integration we wanted to touch on today was our Mandiant Threat Intel Advantage integration. This has actually been newly updated, and we hope to do a session just on this one alone because there's a lot of power packed into the MTA integration itself. But what this one's going to let us do is to quickly access the threat intelligence that's made available by Mandiant and bring that to your fingertips so that you can use it when making kind of mission critical decisions. So for example, in this layout, we have something represented as a ticket. It could be, a low level event. It could be, again, working back to an incident. But in this case, your traditional kind of ticket that would be flowed through something like a ServiceNow or your SOAR platform. And in this case, we're going to want to pull back as much information as we can, not only from Mandiant Threat Intelligence, but also Chronicle Backstory and Virus Total, because now we have all 3 of those turned on. And very similar in presentation, we've got our bottom line up front kind of orientation in the summary view. And you can see very quickly, we're surfacing up threat intelligence from Mandiant, data from Virus Total, as well as data from Chronicle Backstory. And this is the common theme. As you continue to add integrations, you are not adding any additional time to your process. All you're adding is additional value and context. Very similarly to how we drilled into VT and how we drilled into Backstory, we can get into the Mandiant Threat Intelligence data very, very quickly, see what's available from its various APIs, and learn more about who might be utilizing these indicators of compromise, their threat scores, or what Mandiant affectionately refers to as M scores, giving us visibility as to how benign or potentially how malicious something is. With that, we'll go on to the next integration. And I'm watching the chat just in case there's anything coming in. Please let me know, Brenna, if there's anything that's material or if it's something that can wait until the end, and we'll tackle it then.
Awesome. We also have Dan Clark from our CS team in the chat answering some questions there.
Awesome. The next integration is with Google's compute engine. So we have comparable integrations with AWS, with other CMDB platforms out there in the environment, with Azure. The objective of integrations like Google Compute is to ensure that when teams are encountering representations of systems that are not as easily associated with business functions, right, traditional asset management, that we're surfacing the details of the asset to the analyst as quickly as humanly possible. So in this case, if we are, maybe hunting, and if you're a hunter, there's several ways to do it. Oftentimes, teams that we work with are either doing it from a reactive perspective, or maybe they're moving towards a bit more of a hypothesis-driven hunt. So in this hypothesis-driven hunt, what we have is someone has gone out and specifically sought out scenarios where servers are initiating connections with host names, which is a bit of an awkward behavior. And once we have the results, we can see an example of content that we can search. And I'm going to invoke Polarity Focus Mode once more. I'm going to identify this address space And what you'll see here is we will then pull back the asset information from GCP. So I have this 10.ip, and I'm able to click in, and I'm now able to pull back various specifics about the asset and surface that to the analyst. Again, the spirit of this is as quickly as humanly possible, but through it from an efficiency and an effectiveness standpoint, making sure that they are aware of what the asset is, perhaps what the asset does within the organization. Again, the risk of assets, their overall value, where they're positioned, this could all inform defensive strategy, response processes, escalations, et cetera. So asset information, super critical. Definitely want to be getting that into the hands of, our hunters, our responders, our SOC analysts, and even our threat folks, so that they can be making very high quality decisions in real time. One of the last ones we want to cover is our Google Maps integration. So it's a bit out of the realm of the other items that we were talking about, right? So it's not going to be searching your indicators of compromise or selectors, right? Because not everything we search is going to be an IOC. Selectors, you could just be wanting to understand more about an asset, an identity. So we try hard not to only think in terms of IOCs here. But in this case, with the Google Maps integration, I'm going to click out and bring up an example, and I'm going to drag that over to the screen. And what you're going to see here is some general details about the upcoming MWise conference, which we are sponsoring, and we are going to be in there in Washington, D.C. for MWise next week. And here you can see the address for the MWise concert or conference. MWise might have a concert for all I know. Now, obviously, to make this work, we're going to want to go ahead and turn on the Polarity Google Maps integration. So I'll go to subscriptions, and I'll sort and filter, and I'll identify maps, and I'll bring this to the rear ground, and I will then search the address here using Polarity's keyboard shortcut option. And what you'll see now that the integration is turned on is we got a response back. I get details on the latitude and longitude of that particular address, and I can even go to the extent of scouting around the area before we go. Now, for just a fun use case, maybe I'm using this to find where I'm going to park in DC, because if anybody's ever done that, it's a real pain in the neck. Maybe I'm just trying to get lay of the land on coffee shops and restaurants, or in kind of a more security-oriented example, maybe I'm trying to do some intelligence on where the doors are in a building, or where people go to smoke and have lunch in the afternoons, right? Where are my points of egress and ingress? So you can use a Google Maps integration for your day-to-day, but there's lots of practical security applications for something like a Maps application. But really, one of the reasons why we built this in the first place is just to show folks how dynamic and how flexible you can be with a Polarity integration. So most of the integrations that we've shown for Google so far, like VirusTotal, Mandy, and Chronicle, they're bringing back, strings and lines and metadata for you to review, but you can obviously do so much more with a Polarity integration. And we're using Google Maps as just a representation of how we can do it. The last one we're showing live, insofar as the Google integrations, is this Google Drive integration. So again, back to the beginning, we really like to focus in on the concept and difference between knowledge and data. So the things that are structured, we can definitely surface and bring to the attention of analysts, but there might be things in Google Drive that are very relevant to surface as well. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and search Polarity. And what you'll see here is Google Drive is scoured. Now, Google Drive is indexed, and that's what makes this possible. We're hitting the API for Google Drive, which then references the index that it creates. And I can pull back various files that have the mentioning of Polarity. Now, this has been pointed to a very specific directory in Google Drive for purposes of this presentation. You can see we're bringing back things associated with how we present the Google Drive integration, certain presentations on how we can create fusion across team, right? And also, as an example, maybe this is a legitimate supplier of ours and we want some visibility and information on that. So we can grab this supplier inventory, supplier report, and surface that back to end users. If it's a legitimate supplier, then that could dictate how we respond to events associated with the entity that we are searching. So that's the 5 or 6 core Google integrations that we wanted to focus on today. But we also wanted to share something that would be useful to you immediately, whether or not you're a Polarity user today or not. And obviously, we hope you'll become a Polarity user soon. But if you're not, the Google programmable search engine is just a really cool capability that we wanted to bring to the body's attention here today. We'll cover why you use it, how to set it up, and then, of course, how you can use it with Polarity. So if you're not familiar with the programmable search engine, it's a really cool service that's made available by Google. It is a pay service, but the fees associated with individual searching is very, very nominal. We've worked with a lot of our customers to provide justification language so that you can get budgetary approval to connect something like a Google PSE. It is, fractions of a penny, right? Fractions of a cent to perform a search using the PSE capability. So it's definitely something that you can implement into your organization at very low cost. And it enables you to search very specific sites, not just a single, but many, oriented to specific parameters that you have. So it really gives you a mechanism to create a very specific search that suits your nuanced work. There's several reasons why you may use it. One is that the data source that you want to connect to doesn't have an API. In other words, you can't use another programmable mechanism to actually search it. It could also be that there's multiple sources. So if you have 3 or 4 websites that you want to scour for a single thing, but you don't have interconnectivity with it, then the programmable search engine, or PSE as I'll refer to it from go forward, is definitely a good option. If your tools don't connect to it already and you need to search something on a temporary basis, that's also good examples for that. So you may have just a finite use case that's going to expire in a specific amount of time. This might be a good mechanism for you. Also, if the cost of development is too high, if you only have one small use case that you only anticipate encountering the need for a very specific search that doesn't justify the spend of actually programmatically connecting to it through something like an API, then this is also a great alternative. Additionally, you get some instant gratification with using Google PSE. It's fun. You can set up anything from information security, sure, but we've supported fraud use cases with this. And if you're really interested, you could probably set up some searches to go find the best deals on some of the products and services that you might be looking at for yourself. So how do we use it, right? How do we get the programmable search engine working? The first thing you'll need is a API key. So the API key, very simple to get. You will need a Google account. So if you don't have a Google account created, you'll have to do that first. And once you go out there, I included the links here in full. Obviously, Polarity users can grab those live with focus mode. Others, you can watch this recording, or we'll post it when we get this up to YouTube so that it's easy to get. But you want to go out there, get your API key. All you have to do is scroll down on this page, click Get Key, and it's just like any other technology you've ever encountered. You'll give it a name, and you'll extract a key. The more important part is actually setting up the programmable search engine itself, right? So if you've never done this before, you go to the Get Started button here. And if you've created search engines in the past, your inventory will be here, in line with what I just said. You can create them for anything. A site that we don't have an integration with, like a Cisco Talos, can now be integrated pretty seamlessly with Google PSE, right? Or if you wanted to create a negative news integration, for example. So this one was set up to take a company name and then add any negative news term you could ever think about: fraud, claim, murder, all these great terms. And you can now append those search terms to anything that you put into the overlay window. If you have not created one before, you'll see a note in there that says create your first search engine. And you can click that, or you will see the add button. So here you just click the add button, and you can then give this a name. So I'm going to call this legit Windows APIs. And then I'm going to add a site for which I want to search. Now I've gone ahead in advance, and I'm going to grab that from another screen. Everybody could just bear with me. Here we go. This is Windows API index. and I'm going to add that URL here. So you can see the full URL, learnmicrosoft.com. Ultimately, we're after this, the Windows API list. And we're going to go ahead and hit add. Notice at the bottom, you can't create until you add the site. Now here, I'm getting the option instantaneously to add another. I can do this 2 times, I can do this 20 times, I can do this 40 times. I probably have never done it more than 40. I don't know if there's an upward limit on this. But also notice you can do the domain, but you can get down to different folder levels right within the URL. So you can really make this custom to search just the things that you want. You'll have to then, verify that you're not a robot, and you will create. At this point, you get this new search engine. Now, I led with, I want this to be useful for everyone. So you can take this and you can incorporate this into an internal web app, into a custom tool that you've developed. So this is going to work for you, regardless of whether or not you're using Polarity or not. But if you are using Polarity, the value that we're after right now is this string. So at this point, you would copy and paste this string and you would save it. You'd save this off as well as your API key. And then we can continue to have fun with this with Polarity. So there is actually a detailed guide on this, on how you do what I'm about to do, right? Insofar as taking these strings and putting them into the overlay window, or the configuration window rather, for Polarity. So this is out on our website. I put the URL here. It's pretty easy. It's 2 pages of big text. You can go through and add this to your Polarity server with relative ease. But the one I'll show you is comparable to the one that I just set up. And I'll go in here and I will turn on the last integration that we're going to show today, which is the Google Custom Search Engine integration. Maybe I won't show you. So we also have a mechanism to engage with Polarity in a web app. So I'm going to make sure that I have Google CSE turned on. It is. And I'm going to search a API. And we should end up getting results from this custom integration. So here you can see the custom integration itself delivering value based on setting up a simple API key, associating the domains that you want to search, taking those 2 strings and adding it to your Polarity configuration. Cool ones that we've created. One is a Yara finder. So we point this at sources where we think we can find Yara rules. This will help you to inform your defensive strategy. Straight up Google, which is super helpful, especially if you want to avoid all the advertisements and skipping right to just the content that's of high value. And vuln research, so things like finding exploit code. Just to recap here, because we're at time, we've got lots of higher value Google integrations. They suit lots of different use cases, particularly within operational security. Certainly they're customizable, but you can use the PSE framework to create your own, right? And we are obviously appreciative of our relationship with Google, proud sponsors of MWise. It's coming up next week. If anybody's going there, please let us know. Love to connect with you in person. Love to open it up for questions.